everyone, this is Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Now today's video is one that I'm extremely excited about. It's a brand new crochet pattern release and it's called the Bunny Hugs Hooded Baby Blanket. And I'm really excited about it because I designed this with my friend in mind who just had a little baby boy. But of course, by changing the colors, you can make it for a little girl as well. Now, can you look at the stitch pattern? Can you see why I called it Bunny Hugs? When I was working it out, to me it looked just like little bunnies all over the blanket. And I loved calling it Bunny Hugs because it's designed using Bunches of Hugs Red Heart yarn. And I used a teal, and then I also used this variegated to make contrasting stripes. This is a new yarn by Red Heart, and the neat thing about it is this little symbol right here. It says tested for harmful substances, and I think that's really cool and really great of them to put out a yarn that's chemical free, toxin free, that's been tested to make sure that it's perfectly safe for little babies and children. Alrighty, now you can find this crochet pattern on my blog, and of course, and as always, I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. To make a Bunny Hugs hooded baby blanket, you're going to need about 10 ounces of 2 different colors of yarn. My original demonstration was with Bunches of Hugs in 2 different colors, a solid and a variegated. And this yarn is a number 4 worsted weight yarn. So you can use any worsted weight number 4 yarn for this project. For today's demonstration, just so that you can see it better, I'm going to be using this light pink and this light blue because with the variegated that I used, even though it's really pretty, it's a little bit difficult to see in the video. So I'm going to be using these 2 colors for our demonstration today. I will be working back and forth with my original as well as the one we're making together. You're also going to need an eye hook, and we're stitching with an eye, which is a 5.50 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need your scissors, and then you'll also need a needle for weaving in those ends. Alright, I'm going to show you how to do the stitch pattern. And to make the blanket, you're going to need to chain 125 chains. For the demonstration, I'm only going to chain 25. So let's start with our slip knot. And we'll chain 25. For the blanket, you need to chain 125 chains. Now I have only chained 25 chains. You'll need to chain 125 chains for the blanket. I'm going to show you exactly how to do the stitch pattern. I'm just not going to make it as big, of course, as the blanket. Once you have stitched your 125 chains, we're going to stitch a row of double crochets across. We'll begin by stitching our first double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yarn over, go in that chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. Now we're just going to place 1 double crochet in each of the chains across. Now our chain 3 counted as our first double crochet. When you get to the end of your row, you should have a total of 123 double crochets. So just to repeat, 1 double crochet in each chain across. Once you've stitched a double crochet in each chain across, we're going to chain 3. This chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. We're going to turn and we're going to place a double crochet in the next 2 double crochets. Our chain 3 counted as our first double crochet, and then we stitch 2 more. We're going to chain 2. We'll skip the next 2 stitches, and then we'll stitch 3 double crochets, 1 in each of the next 3 stitches. And this is how you'll work the row across. Chain 2, skip 2 stitches, and 1 double crochet in the next 3. Chain 2, skip 2 double crochets, and then double crochet in the next 3 stitches. And you'll work this pattern of 3 double crochets, chain 2, skip 2, all the way across your row for row number 2. At the end of your row 2, you should end with 3 double crochets. Now we're only going to chain 1 and turn. All right, for row 3, we're going to place a single crochet in these first 3 double crochets. Now we're going to stitch 2 triple crochets. And the way we're going to do that is we're not going to stitch them in the chain. We're going to come down here and stitch them in those double crochets from the previous row. To stitch a triple, you're going to wrap your yarn on your hook 2 times. We're going to come down here to this double crochet, pull up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on your hook. Yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, go through the second 2, yarn over, and go through the third 2. That's your triple. Let's do it again. 2 wraps. We're going to go in the next double crochet, pull up that loop, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, and go through 2. And that's where we get the appearance of the bunny. You turn it over, but it'll show up more when we add the second color. And this is the way that this row is going to work. You'll place 1 single crochet in each of the double crochets, 1, 2, and 3. And then you'll stitch 2 triples, 1 in each of those stitches from the previous row that we skipped. One single crochet in those next 3 double crochets, and then 2 triples, 1 in each of those 2 double crochets that we skipped. And you'll complete this across this row. 3 singles, 2 triples, working in those lower that we skipped, 3 singles, 2 triples, working in those double crochets we skipped in that lower row, 3 singles, 2 triples, 3 2 3 2 all the way across this row until you reach the end of the row. When you get to the end of your row, you should end with those 3 single crochets. We're going to chain 3 and turn. And this is where the bunnies can really show. If you turn your work over, you can see there's 4 little bunnies on mine. The little head and the little ears, and it's really super cute. All right, so now we're going to do another row like this row we did down here. We chained 3, and then we're going to double crochet in the next 2 stitches. We're going to chain 2. We're going to skip those 2 stitches in between and go right to those 3 single crochets and stitch 1 double crochet in each of those stitches. Chain 2, skip those 2 stitches and stitch 1 double crochet in each of those 3 stitches. So basically, we're repeating what we did on row 2. 3 doubles, chain 2, skip 2, 3 doubles, chain 2, skip 2, 3 doubles, all the way across. Now, one thing to remember is that your stitch count will never change. Your stitches will change because sometimes you're doing chains and sometimes you're doing triples, sometimes you're doing doubles and sometimes you're doing singles. But your stitch count per row does not change. You began with 125 chains, and because we worked in the 4th chain from the hook and then double crocheted across, you had 123 double crochets. And so every row will have 123 stitches. All right, so let's repeat this row across. We'll do another row like this one, and then we're going to change colors, and those bunnies are really going to pop out. Again, you should end with 3 double crochets. We're only going to chain 1, and we're going to repeat the row that we did here, where we did 3 singles, 2 triples in the stitches below, all the way across. So we'll start in that first single crochet or double crochet and stitch a single. 1 2 3 singles. Now we're going to stitch those 2 triples going down to the double crochets below around that chain 2 and stitch 2 triples. All right, now we're going to do 3 single crochets in those 3 doubles. 1 2 3. Now we're going to do those 2 triples, working in the double crochets below that we skipped on the previous row. Okay, we'll continue this all the way across, and then the next row we're going to change colors. I completed this row of the 3 singles, 2 triples, and the way that this pattern works is you'll have your basic foundation double crochet row, and then we're going to stitch 4 rows of one color, and then we'll change to the next color. I'm bringing in my blue, and we're going to leave the pink attached, and we will be trailing it across the side, and then when we come back and put our trim on, it won't be seen. If you're more comfortable cutting it off on each row, that's totally up to you. You certainly can do that. All right, so now we're going to stitch the row where we do 3 double crochets and skip 2, chain 2, skip 2. All right, so let's do our chain 3. Snug those down. We'll turn our work. We'll double crochet in the next 2 stitches. Because remember, our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. Now, one thing to remember, when you're changing colors, make sure you do your chain 3 after your color change, or you'll end up with 1 pink stitch here because our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. What I do is I just sort of snug that down on both ends there, keep that in place, and now we'll just continue with what we've already done. We've got 3 double crochets. We're going to chain 2. We'll skip the next 2, and then we'll stitch 3 double crochets, 1 in each of those singles. Chain 2, skip 2, and 3 double crochets, 1 in each of those singles. And we'll continue this all the way across like we have in our previous rows. And then the next row is going to be another bunny row. I completed this row, 3 double crochets, chain 2, skip 2. We're going to chain 1 and turn. And we're going to repeat what we did on what I call the bunny rows. So we've chained 1, we'll stitch 1 single crochet in those first 3 double crochets, and then we'll stitch 2 triples working in the stitches below. There we go. Now we're going to do a single in the next 3 stitches. And then we'll do 2 triples working in the stitches below where we skipped. All right. And we'll continue this across this row. And again, you'll continue to complete this across the row, 3 singles, 2 triples, 3 singles, 2 triples, all the way across your row. And when you get to the end of your row, you're going to end with those 3 single crochets. And then you'll repeat those 2 rows again. So what I have done is I've gone ahead and I've stitched another row of the 3 double crochets, chain 2, skip 2, and then another row of the 3 singles and the 2 triples, so that I have 4 rows of the blue. And the way that this pattern will work for the blanket is that you're going to do 4 rows of one color and then 4 rows of the next color, and alternate every 4 rows. And what I want to show you here is the side. You're going to bring back in your first color, snug that down, and you want to pull that just a little bit. Make sure that's not pulling and that it's not gaping, because you don't want it to be gaping where it's droopy, but you also don't want it to be pulled so tight that it messes up the shape of your blanket. So I put it in, I snug it down, give it a little bit of a stretch, and then I pull the other string and make my chain 3. And then what you would do is you'd repeat these 4 rows again. And in order for your blanket to be as long as it's needed, you're going to need to repeat back and forth 4 rows of each color until you reach row 77. Or if you want it longer, as many rows as you want. You'll repeat back and forth, 4 pink, 4 blue, or whatever 2 colors that you're using until you reach row 77. Once you have completed row 77, you need to tie off your yarn and weave in your ends. Now, the other piece you're going to need is the hood. If you're not making the hood, just fast forward in the video past the hood part. To make the hood, we're going to do it exactly the same way that we did for the blanket. The only difference is you're only chaining 45 for your initial double crochet row, and then you'll do everything the same. I've got 4 rows of this teal, 4 rows of my variegated, and then you'll repeat that, do 4 rows of the blue again, and then 4 rows of the variegated. And that will get you up through, let me check my notes real quick. Let's see, you'll need to go through row 17 to make the hood. And that's going to be a hood that's going to fit a newborn to about 18-month-old child. So it's nice and stretchy, has lots of room in it. And so what you'll do is you will do up through row 17 exactly the same way as we did the blanket. Only your initial chain is 45 chains, and that will get you up through row 17, a nice rectangle to make the hood. This is how the hood should look completed. It's a nice long rectangle. You have 4 rows alternating your colors back and forth, and then your additional double crochet where we started. To form the hood, you need to decide which side is your front and which side is your back. And one really cool thing about this pattern is, if you'll notice, it looks the same on the front as it does on the back. Now, the side you've decided to be your front is going to be on the inside, and we're going to fold it over. We're going to take matching yarn. We're going to put our hook through. Join in, and then we're going to stitch single crochets all the way down the back of the hood, joining the sides together. I'm also going to leave this tail of yarn across and stitch over it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our hook through, going through both sides of our hood, and stitch a single crochet. So I'll pull a loop up, yarn over, and go through both stitches. All right, I'm going to bring it in a little closer so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so here's our hood. These are the 2 sides we're putting together. Make sure you've got the side with the straight row of double crochet, and we're going to be stitching through both thicknesses. Put our hook through, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both loops. And we'll do this all the way across the back of our hood. Now, one thing to remember is you don't want to pull your stitches too tight, because you don't want the back of your hood to be gaping. But also, don't go too loose or it won't hold closed in the back. You don't want any little holes poking through. There we go, got caught on a stitch. All right. So I'm just going to continue down the back of the hood, stitching single crochets going through both the front and the back of the hood, working down, closing up the back of my hood. Make sure everything stays nice and lined up, and when you get to the end of stitching them together, we're going to tie off and weave in that end. I've completed stitching the back of the hood. I'm going to cut my yarn, tie off, and then I'm going to weave my end in. And this is the inside of my hood, so I'm just going to kind of go back and forth through these stitches, making sure they're nice and tight, going through some of the stitches, some of the fibers, and then I'll cut that off. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to attach our hood to our blanket. So the way we do that is you need to find the center of your blanket, and what I do is I fold it in half to find the center. Then I take my hood, and we have to turn it right side out like this, and then I line up that seam that we made with the center of my blanket. And sometimes I'll just take my needle and pin that in place, just like that. Okay, and then we're going to attach the hood to the blanket just using the same technique of single crochets with our matching yarn. Let me pull this down so you can see that a little better. Alrighty, so we're just going to start on this side, and we're just going to single crochet across until we reach the other side. And I put that needle in there to hold it to the center. And give it a good eyeball, good looking at, so you can make sure you've centered the hood on the blanket. Just a reminder, your stripes should be going across. Alrighty? Alrighty. So I'm going to go right through this stitch and right through the first stitch there on the hood. Give myself a little bit more of a tail. I'd rather have a little bit too much tail of yarn than not enough. Alright, so now we're going to attach this the same way we did the back of the hood. We're going to go through both thicknesses, and we're just going to evenly crochet that across, and try to go through stitches and not holes. Alrighty, what that means is on this side is the bottom, and so all we have to do is go through that stitch. But on this side of the hood, you can see it's where we made the stitches, and so we want to try to go through stitches, not holes. We want our hood to stay put. Okay, so I'm just working my way across. Eyeballing it, making sure I'm making nice, even stitches. If you notice that it's puckering, you may have too many stitches, or if it's pulling and there's too much space, you might not have enough. Just take your time as you go. Let's get some more yarn out here. Alright, so I'm going to continue working single crochets, stitching the hood to the blanket until I reach that center, and this is the way that it should be looking. I've worked my way across to the center of the hood, and now I'm going to work my way the rest of the way across. I went ahead and pulled out that needle, so now it's not in my way, and I'm just going to work my way across. Try not to overstretch, make it just lay there, and gently put those stitches in. And I check it as I go, making sure I haven't overstretched it or understretched it, because you want to make sure that it's even, that both sides of the hood are laying the same. And that's where you got to use your own judgment and eyeballing. And you can measure. You can get your tape measure out, and you can measure to make sure the sides are going well. Now, on this side of your hood, the way I have mine done, this is where I trailed my yarn across. So make sure if you're doing that side, or even if it's on the other side, that you make sure you stitch over that trail of yarn so that it's not sticking out, and because it won't make it look very pretty. We want our hooded blanket to be pretty. Mine's a gift, so I want to make sure that mine's as pretty as can be. All right, so once we get to the end of stitching the hood onto our blanket, whoops, I got caught in a different thread there. Once we finish that portion, we're going to go ahead and tie off our yarn and weave in our end, and then we'll finish with a nice simple double crochet trim. You can always add a more intricate trim if you want to. I just don't want to. And remember, just because I did this in little boy colors doesn't mean you can't do it in little girl colors or even neutral colors. As a matter of fact, this would look beautiful in pink and gray or beige and brown. All right, going to tie off my end. Grab that needle and weave this in. If you decided you don't want the hood, the next portion for you is just the trim, just like it is for us. And it'll be a little bit different, but not much different. We're going to be stitching completely around the whole blanket, including the hood. If you didn't add the hood, then you'll just stitch around the whole blanket. All right, so let me show you how this looks real quick, and then we'll do the trim. There's my hood on my blanket. This is the inside. Here's a seam here, and then our inside seam here. Look the hood out. That's what the back should look like. And there's a string I need to weave in real quick. And now our blanket is ready for a fun, simple trim. All right, let's do the trim. Whether you decided to add the hood or not, it's pretty much stitched the same way. We're going to begin by joining our yarn to the right corner, and I'm sticking with this teal color. Of course, you can use whatever colors that you like. And I'm going to chain 3. And the trim is basically stitching double crochets evenly around the edge of the blanket, and when we get to the hood, around the hood. So I'm just going to evenly stitch double crochets all the way around the edge of the blanket. Now, if you want to use a more intricate pattern for the trim, you certainly can. There's lots of them out there. I just decided to keep it basic so that the stitch pattern of the blanket is the star of the blanket. Alrighty, so I am just going to stitch 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets where I have them, and then the spaces where I don't, I'll stitch evenly. Now across the top, you'll have a stitch for each of your double crochets, and of course when we get to the hood, you will as well. So for now, I'm going to stitch across till I reach that hood, and then I'll show you how to go around the hood. I've stitched across the right side of my blanket, and now I'm going to stitch around the hood. And it doesn't matter what stitch is there, you're just going to place 1 double crochet in each stitch. So I'm going right in this first stitch, and we're just stitching 1 double crochet in each of the stitches around the hood. Oops, there we go. And it just nice and smoothly moves around that edge, and then we'll go all the way around the hood till we get back over to the other side of the hood and reach the blanket. And I like doing it this way because I think it gives it a nice size hood, but it also makes the hood come in just a little bit so it can stay on the baby's head. Of course, that would depend on how big the baby's head is. Little tiny baby, it's going to take a while for their head to fit in the blanket. Alrighty, so I'm just moving around, working in all the stitches of the hood, stitching 1 double crochet in each stitch around. And remember, if you decided not to make the hood, just keep stitching across till you reach the next corner. I've completed the stitching around the edge of the hood, and now I'm going to stitch across the left side of the blanket. So here's my last stitch, and I'm just going to start right in that first stitch. So we have a nice smooth move from the hood to the blanket like we did on this side. And I'll just continue working across till I reach that corner of the blanket. And again, if you're not making the hood, all you needed to do was stitch double crochets across. So I'll just continue stitching double crochets until I reach this corner. I've completed the second part of this row after the hood, and I'm at the corner. And what you're going to do at the corners is you're going to stitch 3 double crochets right in that corner so that your blanket eases nicely around the corner. All right, I'm going to turn my work, and I wanted to show you this because this is where we trailed our yarn across. And you need to make sure you stitch over those. So I'm just going to work down the side, and this side doesn't have stitches, and so we're going to just evenly stitch double crochets, trying to work in the stitches, not the holes. And you just have to eyeball it because you don't want there to be gaping holes between your stitches, but you also don't want them to be so up on top of each other that they don't lay nicely. So it's just kind of an eyeball thing. All right, so now I'm to where I carried my stitch over or trailed my stitch over. And what you do here, I'm going to stitch there. And then as I stitch my double crochet, I'm going to go around and make sure I stitch over that portion of yarn where I stitched, over that portion of yarn where I trailed my yarn. And then that way it's caught in those stitches and it doesn't show. It's inside. And I want you to do that all the way along. And to complete the blanket, basically what you're going to do is stitch a double crochet evenly down the side, 3 double crochets in the corner like we did here, stitch across the other side, 3 double crochets in the next corner, work up to the next side, and 3 double crochets in the last corner, and join with a slip stitch and tie off. And I'll go ahead and complete my blanket, and then I'll show you how to join when we get to the end. So basically, I'm just stitching evenly around the rest of my blanket, stitching double crochets, 3 double crochets in each corner, and then I'll join to the chain 3 where we started with a slip stitch and tie off, and then we'll be completed with our cute little bunny hugs blanket. I completed the trim on all 4 sides of my blanket, putting 3 double crochets in each corner. And here I've put the 3 double crochets in this last corner. I'm going to join to the top of that chain 3 with a slip stitch. And I'm going to cut my yarn, tie that off, and then I'll use my needle and weave this end in. And if you want to add an additional trim of some kind, that's totally fine. Like I said, I like just the plain trim so that the stitch pattern can be the star of this blanket. And so that is how you make the Bunny Hugs hooded baby blanket. Once you learn the technique of the pattern, it's super easy, alternating every 4 rows. Make it with the hood or without. It makes a nice blanket, and it doesn't have any gaping holes for little toes and fingers to get caught in. One other suggestion is, if you're making this for a gift, to please include the label of the yarn that you're using so that the person that you're giving it to knows how to wash it, because I'm sure using this for little babies and kiddos, it's going to get a little bit dirty and need to be washed.